as Henry said, I just left Microsoft after 17 really long, amazing years. And I've started my own company. And one of the benefits of being in the technology industry is you get to hear about all the cool technology that's coming out. And so over the years, I accumulated my Surface Pro 3, 2 tablets, a smartphone, a Kindle, 3 iPads, 3 iPods, an Xbox, you name it, we have it at home. I also am quite a social network user. So I use LinkedIn to keep in touch with my professional contacts. I use Twitter to tweet about my work activities. I use Facebook. I use Daily Mile to track my runs. I use Pinterest to find recipes. So I'm quite a social network user as well. How many people does this sound familiar for? How many people would understand this kind of life? Yeah, quite a few of you. How many people would but don't want to admit it? Right. So I'm kind of extreme, perhaps, but definitely not unique, based on the research. According to recent research, the average European family has 10 devices. And there are apparently 1.3 billion Facebook users, and 58% of us use social networks. So another show of hands, just out of curiosity, how many of you guys think you have 10 devices at home? How many people are on Facebook? Nearly everyone. And how many people have brought their mobile phones with them today? Yeah. So another piece of research is that 84% of us with mobile phones would not want to go a single day without our phones. So, sounds familiar, yeah? Yeah.
When I forget it at home, I go back.
Okay, when she forgets it at home, she goes back to get it. Everybody do that too? Yeah, I think I do as well. So there are obviously huge benefits to this connectivity. We're supposed to be more productive. We have faster access to information. We can work more virtually. We can have remote employees. Lots and lots of benefits to this. But the same research that tells us all the positives shares some potential disadvantages. So because we're connected, we have connectivity all the time, we sometimes get distracted and we don't necessarily focus on one thing at a time. So apparently, 35% of us, while we're playing with our children, are using a device, playing with our phones, using our phones. Similarly, 32% of us use our phones while we're driving. Now, mind you, some of that could be appropriate use, but that's a lot of use of phones while we're driving. And there's a piece of research that you probably have all heard, because it was quite well broadcast, from the University of London a couple years ago, that said that multitasking using electronic devices creates the same decrease in IQ as smoking pot or losing a night's sleep. So whether or not we think we're doing a good thing by sharing our minds in this way, we're not necessarily fully on task. So that's one issue. Another issue is that workers have quite a bit of difficulty in kind of shutting down. 69% say they struggle to focus on one thing at a time. And there's a huge erosion of kind of the 40-hour work week. Now, there are some advantages to the fact there's an erosion of that 40-hour work week. But nonetheless, we have a hard time letting go of our work. And one of the ramifications of that is that job stress is increasing. And in fact, recent research said that, let me get the stat for you. Job pressure is the leading cause of stress in the United States. And 75% of employees believe workers have more on-the-job stress than a generation ago. Okay? So we have all this technology. It has all this potential benefit, and yet it has potential downside as well. So I would say that what we need to try to do is harness the value from the technology and become better, what I call social leaders, and use all of this benefit and the resulting mindset shift that we've all made, clearly, based on the answers you guys gave, and get the power. So I think there's huge benefit in terms of innovation, huge benefit in terms of creativity, huge benefit in terms of productivity, but it requires social leaders to really change behaviors and skills to really get that benefit. Okay, so I look at that in terms of connectivity, moving from connectivity to connection. So norms are changing in today's business climate, and there are lots of reasons why. And in fact, Helena this morning talked to you guys about some of them. I'm going to refer back to her because I thought that was quite interesting. So one of the reasons is that we're all social network users. And so at home, we use Facebook, we use Twitter, we use all these, Instagram, and then we expect that same level of connection when we go into the workplace. So companies started moving into social networks originally to have an edge over their competitors. But that edge is eroded, and now it's really commonplace and expected that people have that level of connection with all of the people they liaise with. And that includes their employees, it includes their customers, and it includes society, frankly, and how they engage with society, in my view. Second reason is the one that Helena talked quite a bit about, which is about generational changes. So she talked about the digital natives, Gen Z, which is even more extreme than I'm talking about here. But from the millennial generation and younger, which are now starting to enter the workforce in droves, people expect flatter, more agile organizations. They expect faster response, they expect more conversation, they expect a level of connection that they're not necessarily getting today, and certainly wasn't typical in the past. So the old top-down, hierarchical approach that frankly started post-war, quite militaristic actually approach, is no longer effective with today's workforce. There's a third reason, which is about global working. So clearly, with technology, we can have workers anywhere. I spent 15 years at Microsoft, 12 years at Microsoft here in the UK. I never once had a manager in the same country as me. That is totally normal in the tech industry, quite normal in lots of other industries, becoming more commonplace. And that level of distribution requires a totally different kind of communication because people think, well, they're not connected in the office. They can't just sit down together all the time. And so you have to have a more fluid conversational style to engage with those employees. And there are huge benefits in being able to recruit people from all over the world and work together virtually. So in my view, social leadership has three dimensions, okay? The first one is authenticity. So I don't think any of this connection can happen without a level of trust. And Dom talked about that in his talk right before lunch. Without trust in the organization and without trust by a leader of the rest of the workforce, you can't get the level of connection that you need in today's business climate. The second is around alignment. So I firmly believe that leaders, once they've established that level of trust, need to work to align their values and purpose with the rest of the organization. And that will make a happier organization. And then finally, I think it's about engaging in new ways. And after we have a little break to chat, I'm going to come back and share 5 ideas for how to change levels of engagement in the organization. So by engagement, I'm talking about more questioning, I'm talking about more listening, I'm talking about two-way dialogue, better storytelling, the things that some leaders are amazing at and other leaders just haven't really gotten or just aren't natural at. By the way, there's a book called Social by Matthew Lieberman. Anybody familiar with that book? So this book, he talks about how our brains are wired. And he says that our brains are literally wired to connect, and that we spend our whole lives seeking social connection. And what happens when you socially connect with someone is that it reduces the fight or flight instinct, so the limbic response that you have, and it makes you happier and more productive and more creative. And so by doing these things as a leader and supporting your organization in this way, you're actually responding to what the brain wants and like lifting the quality and happiness across the whole organization. So we're going to take a quick break for a minute. I've, with the help of Adrian, passed some postcards around. So there should be postcards in the middle of your tables, I hope. Otherwise, I can go back and get some out of my bag. And on the back of the postcard, I've posed some questions that I'd like to say we spend 5 to 8 minutes, and you can kind of decide as a table which ones are interesting to you. But they're all questions around this social leadership. So please discuss at your tables for a few minutes. Right, so what I wanted to do was share 5 ideas for ways you could increase social leadership. And I started this talk by talking about technology. I spent about 5 minutes on technology. And now I guess I'm going to argue that being a social leader doesn't actually depend on technology at all. I think it's about a mind shift change and behavioral changes that don't necessarily need technology. So the first one that I thought I'd share with you is what I'm calling team sourcing. Learn the art of team sourcing. So I'm sure you guys know crowdsourcing, where you get ideas from the broad environment. I think leaders today who are really successful are finding ways to get early ideas from their organizations. And that can be in totally low-tech ways. So it can be about holding roundtables. It can be about sending out emails with questions. But it's about the leader engaging their employees early and often. And I mean, when I was at Microsoft, there was one HR leader who came to Microsoft from another organization, and she was hugely professional, very buttoned up, was very proud of the fact that she was very buttoned up. And she never wanted to share anything without any with cracks in it. She never wanted to share anything that wasn't perfect. And what her organization ended up telling her was that they never got to know her well, they didn't feel comfortable sharing with her, they didn't feel engaged, they didn't feel connected to her at all. And she ended up completely shifting. So she came from an industry that was a lot more traditional to the Microsoft environment, and she nearly failed, even though she was seriously, amazingly professional. So I think helping leaders make this shift to being willing to share earlier is something I think that organizations can do. Now, clearly, this depends on their ability to feel a bit vulnerable, authentic, trust, which is why I think the authenticity is foundational. There are amazing technology that help support this. There's Chatter from Salesforce, there's Yammer from Microsoft. I mean, there are tools that are like social networking tools in the organization that are amazingly supportive of this. But I would still strongly argue that it's not about the technology first. It's about behavior first. And I'll tell you one more story from Microsoft, which is pretty good at this stuff overall. I love Microsoft. But it was one of the things that made me really start thinking about this space. So a few years ago, we were early adopting Yammer, which is this social networking tool like Facebook for inside a company. Yeah? So in setting them up, I said to them, now remember, these managers are going to ask you guys loads of questions, but you can ask them questions too. They were like, oh, yeah, right, okay. So the questions start pouring in from the managers about all these topics. Do the senior leaders ask any questions during this half-hour Yam Jam? Not a one. Not a single question came from the manager, from the leader community to the manager community. Now, I think things are evolving from that, but that really got me thinking. I just thought, well, of course, this isn't conversational. If the leaders aren't able to ask the questions, it's one way. So the second tip I would give is something called reverse mentoring. The idea with reverse mentoring is you take your millennial, Gen Y, Gen Z employees, and you set up mentoring relationships with your senior leaders, your senior executives. But instead of having your senior leaders mentor your Gen Y, Gen Z, you do that in reverse, and you have a reverse mentoring. This works amazingly effectively in terms of helping a more traditional leader learn new behaviors and mindsets. So that would be the second thing I would suggest. It's very easy to do, and leaders can be amazingly surprised at the things that they can learn that they would never have thought about by doing that. The third theme, general tip I give is hear your customer's voice. Now, I know that there are lots of industries that are really, really good at this, lots of companies that are amazing at this. But I think there also are lots of companies that get quite internally focused and introspective. And my observation, both from my time at Microsoft and my subsequent consulting work, is that oftentimes problems can be surfaced and solved, and relationships can be improved with customers, frankly, just by having a conversation with them. And again, customers are starting to demand this from a technology perspective. They expect response to their tweets when they tweet about your organization, et cetera. But I'm not even talking about that here. I'm talking about base level. Find a customer advisory board. Engage with them regularly. Bring customers into offsites. Have them present. Have them ask questions, answer questions. Create a dialogue with customers, representative customers, so that you can actually hear their voice. And one kind of creative thing that's slightly more difficult to implement, but worked amazingly well, that I did during my time at Microsoft, was set up a leadership development program where we found some strategic customers, partners, who were facing issues in the emerging markets. And we brought our high potential leaders there, and we worked on our partners' challenges as part of our leadership development. So anything like that that can engage your employees with your customers has huge benefit in terms of creating connection. Because remember, it's not just connection with your employees, it's connections with your customers and society as well that's expected. The next one is a little bit of the reverse, which is getting your feet on the street, I like to call it. So getting out of your standard workplace and going and seeing your customers, your competitors, actually out wherever they are. So one of the things we did, for example, at Microsoft when we moved into the devices space was send our senior executives into the retail stores where we gave them a list of things to observe, list of questions to observe, and they went and looked at how the Microsoft phones were positioned next to the iPhones and how the staff were talking about and thought about. I mean, they would disclose, I'm from Microsoft, what do you think of this phone? And they got amazing feedback and information on what was going on in the actual stores. And I think getting HR people out. So get the functions that are not normally out seeing customers. And it has a massive impact on people's ability to think strategically and, frankly, their happiness because they're connected then with what the business is doing. It increases satisfaction. And my final one, before I open it up for some conversation, is what I call be interested, not interesting. So this is just a general commentary on the mindset shift that I think needs to happen. So going back to my story about the leaders not asking questions to the managers, how much questioning are the leaders doing in the organization? Are they telling because that's what they think their job is? I mean, it's for good reason, right? They think they've all been brought into this role in normal circumstances, brought into this role because they're subject matter experts. And so they're used to telling, they're used to being that expert. But how well versed are they at asking the questions? And once they get the fact that actually, by being more interested and less interesting, they're adding more value, then it can drastically change the dynamic in the organization. And I was talking to someone earlier about the fact that I believe all of these changes start from a leader, each individual leader. If you can get a leader to shift behavior, then you get the organization under that leader and around that leader to shift behavior. So I think helping them see there's value and huge value in being interested, not interesting, would be my fifth tip.